Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Circle of Hanik with Yulala Gomez. And today I want to do this capsule talking about women who sustain relationships. This is one of the most common things that I find in sessions when I work with women. Of course, this is something that we discover through the process. Women come to the sessions feeling in a certain way about the relationships, and then we end up realizing that what is happening is that the women feel alone, sustaining, holding, carrying the relationships. This is a very common situation nowadays. So, I will explain a little bit what this is about so that you can start a process of self analysis and introspection. So, let us start with the meaning. What does it mean to carry a relationship? As a matter of fact, part of these sessions, I want to also do a capsule about the roles of the feminine and the masculine energy within a connection. The first thing that I need to say as an introduction is that when we talk about feminine and masculine, we are talking about the energies. There are women who have a higher masculine charge. Therefore, they will attract partners who are more feminine. And there are masculine, or there are men who have a high feminine charge, and they will attract more masculine partners. So when we talk about the feminine and the masculine, we are actually referring to the energies itself, regardless of the genders. Now, in every single relationship, there is a feminine polarity and there is a masculine polarity. In every single one. And we feel attracted to a person who responds to our internal composition or setting. Now, our internal setting might be unbalanced, and this is due to ancestral memories, transgenerational memories, karmic memories, childhood experiences, trauma, etc. So we might be operating in certain situations more from an energy than another. And that, when we talk about in the next class, when we talk about the role of each one, the feminine and the masculine, in their relationships, we will understand way better. Now, carrying a relationship is a masculine, when a woman does it, and she carries the whole responsibility, is an excess of masculine energy in her because she's doing her work and his work, and we will understand better how it feels. This pattern of carrying a relationship happens, or carrying the emotional load happens most of the time in an unconscious manner, because it is a pattern learned early in life. It is a pattern many times learned at home and then repeated in the adult relationships. What are the main points or the main characteristics of a woman who does I call it emotional labor? First, she is doing all the relational work alone, and I will explain what this means. The relational work means that when the two are supposed to meet in the middle ground and both take responsibility for the emotional and logistical aspect of the relationship, the woman find doing it alone, or the feminine aspect find herself doing it alone. Okay? So how does that look like? To have a clear example, when the woman is the one in charge of constantly initiating the contact, addressing issues in order to keep the relationship alive. And the effort isn't equal. She's the planner, she is the initiator, she's the leader. Now, planning, initiating, and leading are masculine characteristics. A male that initiates, plans, and leads never gets tired because it's his nature. While in the other hand, a woman who is calling, contacting, addressing issues, planning activities, she reaches a point where she feels exhausted because this is not something associated to her energy. And we will understand this better when we do the comparison in another class about how both energies operate. The second point that is very, very common in a relationship where a woman is the one that is carrying it, it's that she's in charge of maintaining connection and continuity. The connection and the continuity, especially the continuity, the maintaining of the structure of a relationship is a masculine characteristic again. So now we start to see that caring a relationship means to assume the masculine role plus your feminine role. Basically, you are relating to yourself just using another as a mirror. And that's why, of course, you get tired because you are alone in the relationship. So maintaining the connection and continuity, how does it look like? Okay, thinking constantly about how to keep this relationship from breaking. It's like you feel that you need to maintain or to have strategies in order to keep it up. If you don't keep it up, the relationship might dissolve. So how does this look like in reality? After an argument, you are the one who reaches. You are the first one to find a way to talk. You are the first one to repair. You are the first one to check in. Then when the conversation keeps silent, you are the one to keep it up in order to not enter in silent modes. Now, I am very, very aware that if I, as a woman, do something that is wrong, and I realize as an adult, I have the responsibility to reach out. But watch out about this. How or why are you blaming yourself about the situation? Is it real or is it a tendency to carry a relationship where you're finding in yourself faults that aren't true? Because having again, listen to the word initiative to reach out is a masculine tendency. For the male, it's easy. He doesn't feel less for doing so. He doesn't feel that he has lost his dignity. Not a man who is emanating properly his masculine energy, of course. Another point is to managing the emotional climate. Now, let's understand what is the emotional climate. The emotional climate is when you enter with the person in contact. How is the weather? How is the climate? Do you feel tension? Do you feel his energy low? Do you feel that he's upset? Do you feel that he is sad? I mean, like, this is the emotional climate. The emotional climate is something that, of course, needs to be maintained and managed by both sides. So when you notice that he's stressed, if you have the tendency of changing plans or shrinking yourself or silencing yourself or changing behaviors in order to avoid conflict, the person is not assuming his responsibility in his mood, but you're assuming, oh, no, I gotta make sure that he doesn't get out of control. Okay? When you're absorbing tension silently so that the relationship feels safe for him, then you are managing the emotional climate alone. If you are not letting him the space for he needs to regulate himself, he's an adult. Because let us be clear here, relationships happen between adults, not children. And as an adult, the person have to have the capacity of managing his emotions. If he's upset, he needs to regulate himself. I can't shrink in order to avoid him to have a tantrum as if he's a child. Another of the examples or the main points where a woman is carrying the relationship is when she's giving depth and meaning. Now, the woman, the feminine aspect, does give depth and meaning a lot to the relationship in order to not maintain it superficial. But she invests herself emotionally a lot and spiritually, in this case, in order to give the relationship a profound meaning. While, in the other hand, he keeps it very superficial. He remains very superficial, very surface level. So, an example of how this would look like is that you excuse him about he's afraid of telling me how much he loves me, or he didn't call but he must have been thinking of me because I da 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 da. So you give meaning and depth to the relationship while the person doesn't respond in the same way. When we do the comparison between the feminine and the masculine, we will see how women actually participate in giving depth and meaning, but the men have the responsibility of sustaining that depth and meaning that the women gave to the relationship. Now, the next point I identify here is trying to clarify, repair, or sustain the bond. So, how does this look like? Is when a woman is all the time repeatedly asking him, how do you feel? What are we? Are we okay? When she apologizes or explains, even when it's not her responsibility to avoid conflict, when she initiates a reconciliation after argument or tension, always. Now, again, if you are responsible in reality, not a self made responsibility for what happened, it is your obligation as an adult to make up the situation. But if it's the other party, it's your obligation to remain in your place and let the other act as an adult. The key point to understand what is to carry relationship is basically when she doesn't do it, the relationship falls apart. If she doesn't initiate dates, if she doesn't initiate the when are we going to meet, if she doesn't initiate reconciliation, if she doesn't initiate conversation, if she doesn't initiate commitment, if that is not initiated by the woman and the relationship falls apart, it means that she is carrying the relationship on her own. Now, how these women show up, how they look like, what is their character like? First, they are sensitive and aware. They are women that are very, very sensitive and aware. They notice very, very subtle the emotional shifts. Why? Because they can read the tone, the change in his voice, the language, okay? She senses if he's distant or not. Like her sensitivity is very aware. There is nothing wrong with that, but she has an extra sensitive and awareness because she's ready to resolve rather than simply observe. Oh, he's in a bad mood. Okay. No, there is this predisposition to what happened? Are you okay? Okay. And thinking, how can I make him calm down? And we learned this a lot from our mothers, for example, when they were doing this with our fathers. The woman that carries the relationship on her own is very accommodating and adaptive. She adjusts herself to maintain peace. She confuses love with responsibility. Okay, and this is very, very important. I love a person. Of course, I do share a responsibility in the relationship, but when she confuses it, then she takes his emotions as part of her obligations and her responsibilities. For example, she apologizes for things that aren't her fault in order to keep peace. So she constantly checks is to see if he's okay. Or she thinks if I don't fix his mood, it means I don't love him enough. Then she starts nurturing him in a maternal way rather than holding the silence for him to feel vulnerable and to feel himself. She's trying to fix him. The women that carry the relationships tend to draw to be very attracted to unavailable men because they know how to move in these waters. Okay, so they find themselves constantly chasing someone emotionally, and they feel a strong pull despite of inconsistency, to the point that she will not like a person that is present. She find him intense. Or a person that is constant, she find him boring because the nervous system adapted to chasing, okay, and to be attracted, drawn to men who avoid emotional conversations. It's like it becomes a challenge. And if the woman is interested in a hot and cold communication, and she finds it spicy, when in reality, what is happening here is that she's adapted to abandonment. And this is what she knows. Okay? Persistent. She struggles to let go, even if the dynamic is exhausting, even if she feels tired. She keeps initiating contact after repeated silence from his side. She stays in a relationship even if she's stressed or hurt, constantly for years. She keeps hoping he will change, or she keeps hoping that he will see her value ever against evidence that that ever happened. She maintains herself and she calls it loyalty. And of course, she's strong and loyal. She has a high capacity of empathy and care. She mothers the man rather than becoming a partner. I call this in astrology, you become the moon, not the Venus of the partner. So she puts herself in his shoes constantly, understands his perspective before asserting her own. She forgives repeated mistakes again and again and stays loyal through challenges. She listens patiently to all his problems, even when exhausted. And this is so interesting because there are men who think that this is the right women. The women should be like that. And there are women who, of course, think that this is the right thing to do. And I have heard people saying and thinking that this is the actual good women. Watch out with good women that end up sick, abandoned, that they don't give themselves the importance that they have, that they don't pursue their own dreams because they are after the men. These are not the good women. These are dysregulated women. What are the root causes? Well, first, culture, big time, cultural background. And that includes, of course, the childhood experiences of needing also to keep adults emotionally balanced. Love that was learned to be conditioned is love is something to earn and maintain. The absence of supporting masculine may be present, but emotionally unavailable or inconsistent. Identity built on giving, self-worth tied to usefulness, caretaking, and emotional labor. Okay, if I do, I'll be loved. If I'm good, I'll be loved. And what is the cost of caring alone? First, diseases. Big time diseases, diseases associated to feminine body, for example, certain kinds of cancer, uterus, breasts, all are associated to chronic exhaustion in the relationships. Difficulty receiving from others, guilt when setting boundaries, repetition of unbalanced relationships, desire or erotic energy tied to effort and chasing. The chronic exhaustion with years take the body to become debilitated and to become sick. But it's something that starts from the beginning of the relationship or of the beginning of the, when the person start entering in relationships with others. Now, when a person has chronic exhaustion, for example, how does it look like? Well, she feels mentally drained after trying to manage the relationship all day. She starts feeling physically very tired of worrying and overcompensating. She goes to bed emotionally depleted, even if nothing major happened. Also, when he travels, if she's married, she feels release and relief. When a woman feels happy, relief, when a man travels, it's a sign of chronic exhaustion. Of course, she has difficulty receiving from others help. She feels uncomfortable if she receives support or compliments. She prefers to do everything on her own. She feels that accepting something is a sign of weakness or failure because she's conditioned to, I must do it myself to keep things safe. Okay, I must do it myself in order to keep this man next to me, when it's actually the contrary. The more a man does for a woman, the more he will be invested in her emotionally. But the woman thinks the less I cost him emotionally or financially or physically, the more he will stay behind. And these are patterns that we got to analyze in ourselves. Nobody can do it for us. Of course, feeling guilty for declining, let's say, late texts or calls or conversations, or declining plans that you're not interested in. Uh, Very worried to say things like, I need a space, and fear that that will make the partner absent or upset, and constant over explaining and apologizing for simple limits. Okay, that is another example. Okay, so guilt shows how internalized the pattern of responsibility for others' feelings is. I feel guilty when I don't need to feel guilty. And to be honest, feeling guilty is a sign of arrogance, because it's arrogant that you think that you have to carry everything on your own, even if it sounds as humility. Well, how do you recognize the pattern? Ask yourself the next questions. Am I maintaining the relationship? Am I seeking clarity and connection while he avoids it? Am I regulating the emotional climate alone? Am I giving depth and meaning when he does not? If yes, you may be carrying the relationship. What are the steps to break the pattern? Well, they always recognize and name it. I am sustaining what is not my responsibility. Separate the roles. And we're going to do a class about the roles of the feminine and masculine. So it's important to clearly define what belongs to you versus what belongs to him. Activate your inner masculine. Set limits, maintain your boundaries, hold your energy. Also, this is very associated with a weak masculine, the projection of the masculine outside, and then falling in love with fantasies that aren't real. And we also will do a class about that. Stop controlling the relationship. Don't explain, justify yourself, or chase. Chasing is a masculine quality, not a feminine one. Releasing expectations of rescue. Let the relationship reveal its true nature. When you do nothing, the relationship will reveal its true nature. If it fall apart, it wasn't a relationship. You were in a relationship alone. But if you are constantly saving it and rescuing it, of course, you will have a fake relationship, calling it a relationship and not realizing that there is no relationship, because the relationship takes two. So doing nothing helps the relationship reveal its true nature. Men are very, very practical. If you don't do their role, there are two options. Either they do it or they leave. There is no middle ground. Stay present without overcompensating. Feel, register, and allow space without fixing. No need to fix anything. You are upset, you are tired, it is okay. Okay, signs of breaking the pattern. Less anxiety over his response, reduce need to explain yourself, more internal clarity about the relationship, desire shifts from mind to body, because what happens when the desire is in the mind, I am attracted when he is absent, but when I'm with him, I don't really feel that passion. I'm tired. I'm sleepy. Okay, because you are carrying the relationship and you are holding a fantasy. When you are breaking the pattern, your desire moves from the mind, which is the desire when I see him, to the body when I'm present. And of course, no longer justifying absence or evasion. Now, I will offer you here a guided reflection. Okay, so where do I overcompensate? Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take 5 slow, deep breaths. While you're doing this, notice where tension or tightness shows up in your body. Bring awareness to your chest, stomach, or shoulders, because these are the areas where we actually store overcompensation. Now, in order to identify where you overcompensate, ask yourself, in which relationships do I feel like I carry more than the other person? Friends, partners, even at work. Where do I smooth over, explain, or manage emotions for someone else? When do I feel responsible for someone else's smooth decisions or connection? Identify the moments. In which relationships do I feel like I carry more than the other person? Okay, where do I smooth over in order to explain or manage emotions for someone else? And when do I feel responsible for someone else's mood decisions or connection? And the examples for these are, for example, sending extra text to keep the connection alive, explaining in repeated occasions why you feel hurt or what you need, adjusting your plans or desires to avoid conflict, comforting someone who hasn't addressed their own emotions. These are areas where you overcompensate. And then, after exploring where, then explore why. What beliefs drive me to do this? For example, if I don't do this, the relationship will fail. I have to keep the peace. What are your excuses? What early experiences might have taught you to take responsibility for others' emotions? Home, school, family, society, religion. What fear shows up when I don't step in? Do I fear rejection? Do I fear abandonment? Do I fear conflict? And then write it down. I overcompensate because, and write freely without judgment. Notice the impact on you. How does carrying this load affect your energy, your joy, your desire? How does it affect your body? Do you feel tense, fatigue, restlessness, sick? What patterns repeat in your relationships when you overcompensate? What happens after? And then you can do that by saying, when I carry too much, I feel, and then write down the sensations, emotions, and the consequences. And the small shifts. Think about 1 or 2 concrete actions you can take to start reclaiming your energy. Because at the end, this is about reclaiming your energy. For example, pausing before fixing someone else's feelings, holding your boundaries without apology, not initiating contact when it hasn't been reciprocated, not smoothing over conflict immediately, and starting today One way I can step back and honor my energy is, what is your begin?